Hello, Howie Bentley here. Welcome to episode number 9 of Sword and Sorcery Heavy Metal. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 classic sword and sorcery collections by author. And like the list I did of top 10 novels before, I prefer to start with number 1 and go forward because the lower numbers are pretty much predictable. The higher I get, the more I get into some obscure sword and sorcery, or some things that are a little less known. So I'll go ahead and start with number 1, Kull, Exile of Atlantis. Some of you may be surprised that I picked this collection over any Conan collection, but Kull stories like The Shadow Kingdom, By This Axe I Rule, and The Mirrors of Tuzun Thun combine a dreamlike quality of the tales with the barbaric actions of King Kull, with his time spent alone brooding on the throne of Valusia about the meaning of existence. Though Kull was the prototype for Conan, I think a lot of these stories had a special quality about them that weren't present in the Conan tales. My song By This Axe I Rule appeared on the 2002 Cauldron Born release, And Rome Shall Fall. I re-recorded it for the 2021 Cauldron Born album, Legacy of Atlantean Kings. I was the first to write a song about Kull. Book number 2, The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. Though I picked the Kull collection as my number 1 choice on this list, that is certainly not to slight Conan. This collection, and by the way, be sure to pick up the Del Rey editions, as they contain the unexpurgated texts, just as Howard wrote them, plus synopses, unfinished fragments, and comments on the texts by noteworthy Howard scholars. I'll mention 2 more Conan collections after this one, but this book contains what I consider to be the best of the Howard Conan tales, such as The God in the Bowl, The Scarlet Citadel, The Tower of the Elephant, Black Colossus, The Pool of the Black One, and The Frost Giant's Daughter. Book number 3, The Conquering Sword of Conan. This one contains the servants of Bit Yakin, Beyond the Black River, which is a favorite of mine, as well as The Black Stranger, Man-Eaters of Zambula, and Red Nails, which is a popular tale amongst Conan fans. Book number 4, The Bloody Crown of Conan. This collection contains The People of the Black Circle, The Hour of the Dragon, and A Witch Shall Be Born. If nothing else, the price of this book is worth it just to own a copy of The Hour of the Dragon novel, exactly as Robert E. Howard wrote it. The other 2 tales are outstanding as well. You'll remember the crucifixion scene from John Milius's Conan the Barbarian when you read A Witch Shall Be Born. Once you've collected The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, The Conquering Sword of Conan, and The Bloody Crown of Conan, you will have every Conan tale Robert E. Howard ever wrote. My song Crom Count the Dead refers to a number of Howard's Conan tales. Crom Count the Dead appears on the 2014 Cauldron Born EP, Sword and Sorcery Heavy Metal. Book number 5, Bran Mak Morn, The Last King by Robert E. Howard. Bran Mak Morn is the last king of the Picts, and these tales are about his stand against the might of Imperial Rome. As far as I'm concerned, 2 of the greatest sword and sorcery tales ever written are The Worms of the Earth and Kings of the Night. The Worms of the Earth is a favorite of many Howard fans. It features some cosmic horror elements reminiscent of both Arthur Machen and H.P. Lovecraft. It is hard to beat, but I have to go with Kings of the Night as my favorite of the 2, as it not only features Bran Mak Morn, but King Kull of ancient Valusia, transported some 100,000 years into the future, into Bran's time, by the means of Pictish sorcery performed by the tribal wizard Gunnar. Kings of the Night also features one of the finest battle scenes ever appearing in sword and sorcery literature. Robert E. Howard was second to none when it came to writing battle scenes. I wrote and recorded 2 songs about Bran McMorn, originally featured on the 2002 Cauldron Born album, And Rome Shall Fall. And those were re-recorded for the 2021 Cauldron Born release, Legacy of Atlantean Kings. My song Finder of the Blackstone refers to the Bran McMorn tale, Worms of the Earth. And my song And Rome Shall Fall refers to Kings of the Night. I was the first to release an album featuring songs about Bran McMorn. A year later, the Italian heavy metal band Rosicrucians would release their concept album about Bran titled Worms of the Earth. Book number 6, Death Angel's Shadow by Carl Edward Wagner, published in 1973. This collection contains 2 tales that are novellas and 1 novelette. The first one is Reflections for the Winter of My Soul, and it involves a group of people who are snowbound in a castle, and one of them is a werewolf. The plot thickens when Cain shows up. The second story is Cold Light. Cain is laying low in a small town when a fanatical and ruthless, self-righteous bounty hunter shows up with a posse after Cain. The third story is a novelette and is a totally gothic horror tale titled Mirage. In this story, Cain enters the deserted ruins of an old castle where he falls under the spell of a vampirus. I can't recommend this collection enough. I should also mention that Cain is a very unique character in that he is somewhat of a villain. The stories are great, but some sword and sorcery fans prefer less moral ambiguity in their sword and sorcery. As for myself, I find Cain completely relatable. Book number 7 is Nightwins by Carl Edward Wagner, published in 1978. I won't go into synopses for each of the stories, but I will mention that the first tale in the book, Undertow, is one of the finest sword and sorcery yarns ever written. It would easily be in my top 5. The reason I picked Death Angel's Shadow before Nightwinds is Death Angel's Shadow overall is a bit more solid. Every story in it's great. Whereas the stories in this, there are some great stories and there are some that I don't consider as strong as others. Still highly recommended. Book number 8, Tales of Zoth by Clark Ashton Smith, published in 1995 by Necronomicon Press. Of course, all these stories were published long before that, some of them in Weird Tales magazine and some in other publications. I grabbed this as quick as it came into the science fiction mystery bookstore in Atlanta in 1995. This is a real treasure in that it collects what are pretty much the darkest of Clark Ashton Smith's tales, those that make up the Zothic cycle. There are 3 books in this collection, and every tale is a dark and decadent gem. My favorite is The Empire of the Necromancers. In this one, 2 sorcerers raise an army of the dead. Some of the liches, though dead, regain consciousness and turn on their masters. I first discovered Clark Ashton Smith's writing in Tales of the Cthulhu Mythos when I read Ubo Safla and The Return of the Sorcerer in the early 1990s. When I first read Smith, it felt like my brain was turning somersaults. H.P. Lovecraft summed up Clark Ashton Smith writing perfectly when he said, "In sheer demonic strangeness and fertility of conception, he is perhaps unexcelled by any other writer, dead or living. Who else has seen such gorgeous, luxurious, and feverishly distorted visions of infinite spheres and multiple dimensions, and lived to tell the tale?" Book number 9, Sorcery Against Caesar by Richard L. Tierney, published in 2020. Of course, the stories in this collection were published long before 2020, but this was the last time they were collected. Like just about every book that I've mentioned on this list, the stories were published long before the date of the collection. Inspired by Jack Palance's portrayal of the biblical Simon Magus in Victor Savelle's 1954 film The Silver Chalice, Richard L. Tierney set about creating his sword and sorcery hero, Simon of Gitta. Simon is an escaped gladiator turned sorcerer who pits his sword arm, sorcery, and wits against the might of imperial Rome. Tierney had a keen interest in imperial Rome, the history of early Christianity, and Gnosticism, which he uses to ground these tales in a very realistic setting. I first discovered the Simon of Gitta tales in the first 3 volumes of Andrew J. Offutt's Swords Against Darkness anthologies. These were published in the early 70s. There are a total of 16 stories, 16 Simon of Gitta stories, many of them previously published by small press outfits, plus the epic poem Vengeance Quest. All of these can be found in Sorcery Against Caesar. It is the complete Simon of Gitta collection. And book number 10, Far Away and Never by Ramsey Campbell, published in 2021 by DMR Books. I have always been of the opinion that to write sword and sorcery well, you have to have a good feel for writing horror. Great sword and sorcery encompasses the horror genre as well. Ramsey Campbell is a horror writer's horror writer, so it's no surprise this collection is outstanding. Far Away and Never collects all of the sword and sorcery tales written by Campbell, other than his completion of some unfinished Solomon Kane tales written by the character's creator, Robert E. Howard. As a side note, Ramsey Campbell also wrote the novelization for the 2009 Solomon Kane movie. I had read Campbell's Tales of the Swordsman Ryer long ago in Andrew J. Offutt's Swords Against Darkness anthologies, and I was pleased to have all 4 of them in one collection, and they are my favorite of the 8 stories presented here. While not always the most transparent, even the weakest of these tales features Campbell's unique voice and inventions like no other author. Be sure to get the DMR Books collection, as it contains an extra story titled A Madness from the Vaults that previously appeared in Doubt number 1 from 1964, and until now has remained uncollected. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I'm sure some of you are going to have some different opinions about some of the choices I've made, and that's fine. Go ahead and let me know in the comments. Let's see your list. Till then, be sure to tune in next week for Sword and Sorcery Heavy Metal.
They try to poison my wine. They try to